Well, another day and news about the ArenaNet layoff situation just keeps coming. Not all of it very good. We now have an official announcement from the studio, as well as a fairly extraordinary article revealing that, in fact, a lot more devs than the community thought had been laid off were actually laid off. The number we were dealing with was around 100, but it's actually much more than that. And in particular, in fact, because, as you guys know, I've got a very large platform, a very privileged place to be able to reach many members of the Guild Wars 2 community with my channel here. In response to one of the videos I did over the weekend, an anonymous developer did actually get in touch with me and wanted to set the record clear with some facts about the situation. So I have some images and quotes for you all from an ex-developer who wants us to get the facts right. So let's start off first of all with ArenaNet's official word. We've got a post on the forums, update from the Guild Wars 2 team here, you see, from Mike Z. Now, outside of very hastily written messages and obviously beyond personal Twitter accounts and stuff, this is one of the first big official communications we've had from the company on this subject whatsoever. So let's see what they say. It's quite simple, to be honest. Mike Z, obviously being the current game director of Guild Wars 2 during Path of Fire days, not necessarily a spokesperson or involved with everything that's going on at the studio, but the higher up on the Guild Wars 2 project, and someone we would have expected to have not been laid off, of course. Well, he's here, and he says, "Hi everyone. This past week, there have been a lot of questions about the status of Guild Wars 2. I'd like to share with you a little about what's currently going on at the studio and what it means for the game. The Guild Wars 2 team is still committed to bringing content and feature updates to the game. The next episodes of Living World are already in development. Swiss tournament support is coming to PvP, we're looking at more World vs. World events coming soon, and the return of the Super Adventure Festival is imminent. Our long-term plans for the game, like world restructuring and large-scale improvements to quality of life, are still in the works. The studio has recently been affected by layoffs, which is going to take some time to process. There's no easy way for any team to adjust to that. We've had to say goodbye to friends and colleagues that we've worked alongside for years. We're welcoming back some familiar faces to the Guild Wars 2 team that had been working on unannounced projects. After all is said and done, it's going to take some time for us to adjust to our staffing changes. As the proverbial dust settles in the next few days, we're going to reevaluate our schedules to make sure that our releases are realistic and allow us the time to make sure they hit our internal quality bar. That means that some updates are going to see delays, like the recent Warclaw, as we regain our focus. I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks to all of you who have reached out in support of our studio family. Thank you for your patience in this trying time. We're making every effort to keep things running as smoothly as possible and stay on track with releases. Rest assured that ArenaNet is not done with Guild Wars, and the team is not done with our tale of dragons and our eternal conflict in the mists. There's still lots for us to do together. We'll see you in Tyria, Z, and the Guild Wars 2 team." So that's the message. I actually think it's really well crafted and entirely in line with what I would have expected. That being, as we've been saying, that most of this is to do with mismanagement of other projects, and Guild Wars 2 itself shouldn't come out of this too terribly. It's not like they're planning on putting the game on maintenance mode, their only moneymaker. There's no logic in that. It's not like they're planning to let everything fall apart. If anything, it seems there is a real refocus towards Guild Wars and making sure Guild Wars is as good as possible, which means for fans of Guild Wars, which most of us are first and foremost, we're probably fans of Guild Wars before we're fans of ArenaNet, right? Since they're really about this one IP at the moment. It's probably a good thing. They have that very crucial message in here saying that they're saying hello to familiar faces that used to work on Guild Wars 2, had been reassigned, couldn't continue their Guild Wars 2 work, and now are coming back. So whenever you've heard over the years that a team has shrunk for, reasons that they couldn't divulge, maybe now some of those faces are returning, and we might see some old projects picking up steam. I do think it's dangerous to now believe Guild Wars 2 will get more updates and more sizable updates than the past because it's got more developers or whatever. At the end of the day, a lot of people have been let go, and they are likely still doing something on unannounced projects. I'll come to that in a second. But I think the safest bet for us right now is to believe Guild Wars 2 will continue going on as it has been. Obviously, there's a small degree and period of turbulence right now, notwithstanding the delay of the war claw and potential balance and stuff from last week, you know, might extend a little bit further. But when they get back on track, I think that they'll aim for that status quo. It might also be true that they had, at some point in the past year, since Path of Fire, decided not to do an X-Pack 3, and this whole reshuffling might have made them decide they do want to do an X-Pack 3, but everything there is all highly speculative. Overall, I think Mike Z's message is very solid. It even goes into specific details broken down by game type from those roadmaps we already had. We knew that Swiss stuff was supposed to be coming for PvP. Well, look, the boat hasn't rocked too much. That's still coming. The World versus World stuff we anticipated, still coming. Super Adventure Box, still coming. And the story in general and the conflict they want to tell, still coming. So, hopefully that lays a bit of optimism for people. Another source of optimism for many actually comes from one of the ex-developers, Josh Foreman, who I spent a good deal of time talking about on yesterday's video. I mentioned in that video he does his sculpting streams, to which a kind member of the Spud community posted a Twitch clip in our comments that they'd created from one of Josh's streams, where he was asked about the state of Guild Wars 2. It was later put on Reddit, lots of people have seen it, and this is what he had to say.
My feelings are that Guild Wars 2 is going to do well. It's gonna do great. It's got key people that are still there, as far as I know, that really drove the vision of the game and the quality and the renewed focus on Guild Wars 2, because we were not incredibly focused as a studio. We were trying to do lots of things. That's just a publicly known thing, right? I'm not breaking NDA here. We were trying to do lots of things. I can't say what those things were, but the focus that's going to come out of this will be good for Guild Wars 2 as a game.
So, pretty telling stuff, particularly with regard to the way he talks about the focus of the studio. And for a Guild Wars 2 fan, I can definitely see taking some comfort from seeing what Josh says here. For people who care a little bit more about the studio and the idea of ArenaNet being a multi-game studio, perhaps this becomes a much more complicated issue, and you might not be a fan of NCSoft's decision to intercept here and force a refocus onto Guild Wars 2, but that's kind of the situation we appear to be in. So, you might be feeling good right now. However, there is some pretty bad news to come, particularly starting with this SeattleTimes.com article. Bellevue game studio ArenaNet, the developer of Guild Wars 2, lays off 143. It has in the title. So I remind you, we in the community thought it was about 100. We had that number because one of the developers tweeted that over 100 had been laid off. That was just someone on their own time, on their personal Twitter, said that. That wasn't an official statement from the devs or some kind of corporate, subtle speak to manipulate people to think that things weren't as bad as they were. It was just a number we heard from a personal Twitter that the community gripped. I gripped and have reported on all my videos really about that 100 number, as if maybe it's not that bad, it's only a quarter of the studio. But instead here we see through this article, it's a little bit worse than that. ArenaNet, long-tenured Bellevue game studio responsible for the hit online role-playing game series Guild Wars, is laying off 143 people, and they seem to have it on good authority because a layoff notice filed with the state on Wednesday provided this number of layoffs and said separations would begin on Friday. They then go on to restate the quote we've already heard from Song Yi Yoon lower down. So yes, this was such a large layoff that they actually had to file what I believe is called a WARN notice with the state that so many people had been laid off, and the real number we're dealing with is 143. That's a significant amount more than I was expecting, and means our measly list of roughly 20 people really doesn't tell the whole story. For example, some of my personal thoughts, and I still don't have confirmation on their fates, are with the developers that went above and beyond last year and this year working on Guild Wars 1 updates, like sort of Stephen Clark Wilson and Bill Freist. These guys bent over backwards for the company, did incredible stuff for the Guild Wars 1 community, everything we did there with the Cupcake Drive and stuff, and as far as I can tell so far, there's no news on whether these really key people for a huge facet of the Guild Wars community are even still around. Particularly a kick in the face, considering it was just last month the most recent Guild Wars 1 update came out, massively improving inventory capacity among other things. So, 143. That's a pretty massive margin of error for us. To the next topic of this video, which is tangential to this article. Truth be told, I knew about this 143 number before the Seattle Times article even broke. That's because, as I mentioned at the start of my video here today, in response to my prior productions, an anonymous developer who has now lost their job, I don't know their name and I don't seek to try and identify who they are, did outreach to me explaining what the true numbers were and wishing for me to share it with you guys so that the community could be set straight on the severity of the situation and what is actually going on. So here I have for you all some further statements from an ex-developer they wish you to know about the layoff situation, as well as some images with further clarifying details on what exactly ArenaNet lost. Now, I believe this is all information that has to come to the public eventually anyway because of the WARN notice. So here we have the first image. You can see it's a letter dated the February 25th, 2019, saying the worker adjustment and retraining notification is going to be forced. You can pause the video and try and discern the details there. But next, we have these tables which list what ArenaNet has lost based on the title of the individual, what they did. So we don't know exactly the names of everyone, and perhaps quite rightly so. Surely that's on their own terms as individuals to talk to people about. But we do know the kind of talent that was lost from the studio. So there's that huge number there of just 12 designers. That was their title, and they're out the door. Concept artists, cinematics artists, lead designers, engineers, lead game programmers, technical artists, and so on and so on. We actually have 2 pages of these. You guys can pause and speculate all you like, I suppose. Now, I have been informed that titles weren't exactly the most hard ironing clad things at ArenaNet, that they were assigned quite loosely and labeled quite loosely, but it gives you some idea of the scope of what has happened. Beyond this, I do have some quotes that they do wish me to share. Now, their Reddit throwaway is staring at a blank wall. This is the person who's left a couple of public Reddit comments about their departure at ArenaNet as well. It's not just been messages to me. And I'll just read these out, not editorialize them whatsoever, and let you guys take from it what you will. Consider, obviously, that the writer of this stuff may have their own biases, but I warn you, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Some of it sounds pretty good and optimistic, some of it seems pretty grim. First of all, they say 141 people were laid off. It triggered a WARN notice, and they wikied the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act of 1988. I want people to understand that this is not a minor culling. We're talking 35% of the studio just vanished. Plus, a lot of people who have left took with them large amounts of business knowledge about how systems worked, code works, what random errors mean, all that intrinsic knowledge that's just gone. I happen to know that of all the remaining members, who, with the exception of one, were working on unannounced stuff, of the entire team for one of the core Guild Wars 2 internal tools, is now gone, leaving only a single programmer behind. A lot of people seem to take this as, well, now we'll have 300 people working on Guild Wars 2, which is wishful thinking at best. You don't put all your people on a product that is not making sufficient profit to keep the studio running. It's unfortunate, but a studio without unannounced projects in the works is a dead studio. Unfortunately, at the moment, all of the unannounced projects I know of are no more. However, that does not mean all hope is lost. Obviously, ArenaNet is going to have to reorganize and kick off some new work. I was going to say kickstart, but that now implies Kickstarter, which is not what I want. Of which we heard some of the plans for. Ultimately, those plans were vague enough from Friday that I decided to leave voluntarily and hopefully leave a place open for some other co-workers who need the titles more than me. My hope is that people will be more supportive of Guild Wars 2, especially in the near future, as those teams are going to be going through hell for a while due to this. There are a lot of great talent still here at ArenaNet, and my hope is to see them make more awesome Guild Wars 2 stuff, even if it's without us. Don't look at the well-known Guild Wars 2 departures as the death knell of Guild Wars 2. There are a lot of good folks out there who can and will step up to take the reins. They will just need a bit of patience from the community. Many of us who were laid off chose to opt in to being laid off. We did not know who was selected, and we didn't get better offers for volunteering. More just a measure of certainty in that we chose this fate and maybe it helped someone else. For all we knew, we were already on the list of people to be laid off. Some left because they had greener pastures to go to, but stuck around because honestly, working at ArenaNet was very fun. Even now, after having been laid off, I'm not bitter or angry about it. I think almost everyone who worked there was a fan to some degree or another. It's really quite rare to work in an environment where almost everyone is a fan of the product they're working on, even after years of having worked on it. We've also only recently grown. It's not like ArenaNet has had 400 employees for the duration of my tenure. Most of that growth was in the last year and a half. So there you go, that's what they have to say. I think some of that's really illuminating. Obviously, we don't have to take it at face value. There's no qualification that this is real. But the idea that their secondary products that they may have been working on since, what, 2012, if not earlier, are completely dead and buried. And on Friday, they were having vague plans about where to go next is really incredibly telling to me. That could mean that whatever else they're juggling as a studio now is only just starting up. I mean, that's incredible. Yeah, there's a real mix, right? A sense that a lot of serious stuff has been lost, but also there's a chance to still hope for Guild Wars 2, and the people that are still working there, there's a lot of talent. I guess I'll let you guys see what you think. I don't want to dictate your opinion on what these quotes are here, and just leave them naked for you all to see. So there you have it, guys. One more round of commentary from an ex-dev to round out the video here. This time from Matthew Medina, posting on Reddit with his Barefoot Matthew tag, as he actually suggested he would do on a tweet earlier in the week, talking a reasonably lengthy amount about his thoughts leaving the company. Who says, "Whoa, I didn't really see that. I got my own thread. In my defense, I was dealing with a lot, and checking Reddit wasn't at the top of my list. I just want to thank you all for your support in this thread and others, now and in the past. Given the sometimes contentious atmosphere of the subreddit, I can honestly say that I've always been treated with respect in my limited interactions here, and I'm grateful for that, even if it was sometimes difficult to read the harsher comments about the Guild Wars 2 story. I was taught how to look past hyperbolic feedback pretty early on in art school, so as salty as Reddit can be, it never stopped me from reading posts here, though due to our communication policy, I wasn't always able to respond. Anyway, please know I have no ill will for anyone at ArenaNet or NCSoft. They made a business decision, one I personally disagree with, but I also don't have all the information which led them to this choice in front of me, so it would be presumptuous to think that I know better. This is technically the 5th such event in my career, so I will be fine. I'm handling this well, and I feel more for the people impacted where this is their first such trauma, or where ArenaNet was their first industry job. I had been so incredibly proud of the fact that our studio had never been forced to endure layoffs, and I'm saddened by that harsh reality catching up to us finally. As for speculation that Guild Wars 2 will be worse off in the wake of this, truthfully, it's my belief that no one can know right now. NCSoft certainly believes it will be better, or I doubt they'd have made some of the restructuring changes that they did. Without breaking my NDA, I can say that, although there were 2 other unannounced projects in the works, and some of the developers from Guild Wars 2 had moved to work on them, the Guild Wars 2 team, building Living World after we shipped Path of Fire, was more than capable of guiding the game into the future, and I have no reason to think that will change. The loss of so many devs will obviously impact the game's development in some capacity. The logistical necessity of a major reorg at this point will have to be accounted for, as well as the morale hit for the survivors of the incident, which I know from past experience can be overlooked and quite potent. However, that impact has as much chance of being positive as it could be negative. How, you ask? Because Guild Wars 2 is still in the capable hands of the best live service team in the industry. All of the things I wrote about in my anniversary tweet thread still apply to the people that remain, many of whom are coming back from those cancelled projects to take the helm of Guild Wars 2 once more. I'm heartbroken, of course, that the place I had come to think of as my second family, and contrary to some of my fellow devs, no, it is not naive to believe this. In my opinion, you just need to be careful with how much of your heart you give to your employer and your team, just as in any meaningful relationship, is changing, and that I will no longer be able to get up each day and walk inside those doors to produce amazing content alongside my good friends. But they will soldier on, and so will I, wherever the future leads. Thanks again, y'all. Now that I'm not a dev there, oh, hello mods, feel free to strike the dev flare from my user profile here. I look forward to interacting with you as a player. I won't be going into confidential details because of my NDA, but if you have questions that don't require divulging sensitive information, I'm happy to try and field them within reason. And so, people have sent some messages, but there's been no responses so far. I don't know, maybe if they're particularly illuminated, we'll get to those in the future. But these are his final thoughts. The main thing I'd like to ask him is if anyone else is a champion of bringing us the Malik story someday into the future. But hey, how selfish can we be, right? I'd like to comment more, but I still feel there's a lot to digest, and I'd like to let you guys do that as well as myself over the coming days. So we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for watching. I hope to not be talking about the layoff stuff too much more as things settle down over the upcoming days. It might be worth doing a production on what the possible things ArenaNet could be doing, what are bankable ideas for this studio. It's a topic that's come up in several videos and streams of mine in the past, but I've never really put them in a single cohesive place. Maybe that would be really interesting. I think I'm quite excited to talk to you all about. So let me know if you have support for that, and aside from that, keep the lovely comments coming, the support for ArenaNet, and I will see you for another video very soon.